When I was 6 years old, no taller than waist high, I have a memory that I can not shake out of my head, and it's probably the first moment in my life where, even as a young boy, I knew I had to speak. I knew I had to stand against not a black or white situation, simply wrong versus right.
President Clinton arrived for the annual Group of Seven Economic Summit with one main aim in mind: to open Japan's auto markets to American products.
Okay, we'll do it here.
The G7 summit was hosted here in Halifax in 1996. The people of Africville, they always take the opportunity to voice their concerns or have their story be heard, and what better stage than a global economic forum. Bill Clinton was the president of America at the time, and I remember this because everybody was trying to go down by the Metro Center to see Bill Clinton. But the people of Africville, they had gathered on a side street adjacent to the courthouse. And my grandfather, as always, was at the head of the pack. And, they were upset. They have every right to be, and they wanted people to know why they were upset. So as they are protesting, progressively more law enforcement continued to show up. And I'm right at the front with my grandfather, like I have been my whole life, hand in hand. And I looked across the street and I saw the police force arrive on the backs of horses, almost like riot control. And as things began to get a little closer to the delegates of the G7 arriving at their destination, the people of Africville also amped up their protest. And my grandfather, like I said, of course, wanted to lead the way. And so he's in the front, his arms are in the air, his voice is echoing through the streets of downtown Halifax. And in this moment, something happened that, like I said, I can never forget. A police officer approached us, and they looked at my grandfather, and the words that came out of this police officer's mouth, someone in a position of power, someone who is supposed to protect you. When you hear this as a young boy at the age of 6, you start to really question what's going on. And he looked at my grandfather and he simply said, "Shut up, you N-word, and I will save you the trouble of hearing that." But to me, instantly, I didn't know what this word meant. So in the chaos, the police officer pulled out his billy baton, because my grandfather's not going to back down. He faced this his entire life, and this is my first time really observing what he had to go through. And so the police officer struck my grandfather, and at that time, my mother was at the very back of the crowd of the line, which probably stretched back almost 2 blocks. But everybody knew me, and they kind of scurried me through the crowd back to my mother. And so I remember getting back to my mom, and she didn't really understand what was going on. She probably couldn't see what happened. And so as I'm getting closer, the word is spreading to my mother what had just happened. And so when I finally reached my mother, a place of safety, a place of comfort, a place of love, I looked at her and I looked right in her face and I said, "Mom, why did that policeman call Granddad the N-word? What is an N-word?" And my mother's eyes just instantly filled with tears and started to bawl. And at that time, she had to tell me, as a white person herself, that things aren't always fair, that people don't see the true person, sometimes who they're speaking to, more so a situation or the ignorance that they were raised in. And from that very day forward, there's been plenty of times in my life where people might not notice that I am of Black or African descent, and my tongue has never been quiet from that moment on.
The Africville relocation was presented as a liberal and humanitarian measure to improve the living conditions of underprivileged people. What went wrong?
You're listening to Africville Forever. In Season 1, we told you the story of the destruction of my community.
They cheated us, and I'm one that was cheated. If you don't move at a certain time, we'll bring out the bulldozers and push your shacks over.
In Season 2, we are exploring its rebirth.
I know we'd all fight to get back out there. We still call it home.
My name is Eddie Carvery III, and my grandfather, the original Eddie Carvery, has maintained the longest civil rights protest in North American history.
It's time that we looked at them wrongs and righted them.
He stood up for Africville since it was destroyed in the 1960s, refusing to leave the land. For too long, the Africville survivors and descendants have been divided, hampering our efforts to take back the land and rebuild our unique community. So please join us as we explore practical, inclusive solutions to reunite our people and once again rebuild our community. Can we get you to end on the note of, let's hear Africville forever?
Africville forever and a day.
The relationship between law enforcement and Africville has always been a fragile one, and still to this day. In Halifax, less than a decade ago, random street checks were happening on far too often of an occurrence, and usually in neighborhoods like UniX Square. And these are where the children of the elders of Africville all have lived and grown. There was no escaping the eyesight of the police, the harassment that my people have faced. It's been ongoing. Today we are going to speak to Shaun Carvery. Shaun Carvery, he is my second cousin. He is the son of Irving Carvery, who has been the opposite side of the coin in the fight for Africville alongside my grandfather. Shaun has been a committed member of Descendants of Africville in trying to reunite our people through engaging with the youth. He is a basketball coach, he is a father, he is a police officer, actually a detective with the Halifax Regional Police. And so knowing that my cousin is not only a member of the police force, but a detective, I respect him for one, and we're all entitled to our own opinions, but personally myself, I know things cannot change from the outside. You can put as much pressure and force as you would like, but until there is somebody inside of that situation that opens the eyes of those within an organization, you're not going to see much of a change. So my hat's off to him for taking that step, because not only is it a scary place to be for an Africvillian, and a Carvery particular at that, but then you have the backlash of the general community, of your friends and your family. And that alone probably is the hardest part, because these are people you love, you care about, you want to see do better. To take that leap of faith in trying to better not only yourself as a person or your family, but to change an organization's outlook on a greater group of people and do it wholesomely, that's a big risk. So I appreciate what he has done, but I also know it was not easy. And so I want our listeners to know that this is a very difficult and daunting task and challenge that he took on, but he does it with pride because he is an Africvillian and he loves his people. So, Shaun, could you please tell us a little bit about your connection to Africville in terms of your family and emotion? Why don't you let our audience know a little bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, and the whole works?
For those of you who don't know me out there in the world, I'm Hally_famous on Instagram. Look me up. I am a son of a direct descendant from Africville. My dad's Irving Carvery. I've been around the block a few times. I've coached at Community Y. I've coached at Citadel High School. I've coached basketball in Nova Scotia. I just keep myself involved. Right now, I am currently employed with Halifax Regional Police for 23 years. I know I may not sound old, but some days I feel old.
You don't look it. You don't look it.
I'm aging well. I'm like a fine wine.
Yes. Could you please tell us a little bit about like how your family and your connection to Africville, like the things that your father has done, some of your early memories, maybe like when he took you down to the Ville?
Yeah, I had the pleasure of growing up hearing about Africa because my dad was involved right from the get-go with the Genealogy Society. We have the picnic every year down in Africville on the holy grounds. We just celebrated our big one. The next one's coming up this July. Make sure you all come check it out. It's only 3 days, but it's still going to be a party.
That's it.
I decided to put my hat in for the board this year, so I'm sitting on the board helping organize. Not organize the picnic, but my first memory, and it's funny because it was in the Africville Spirit Lives On book. It's when we're sitting on the hill. It's me, my dad, my brother. And I remember it so clearly because I was wearing the Jordan 1 Chicagos that I wish I still had to this day because I could make a mint off of them.
The resale value would have been
I'm like, yeah, I remember them Jordans that I was wearing that day. But growing up, we always kept that connection because my dad said, this is what you need to know. This is where we're from. This is your history. And living in Halifax, we heard the stories of what happened and how it's important to know where you come from so you know where you're going.
That's it. And those are strong words. And thank you for sharing that. And, just to touch a little bit on what you first said in your introduction and what you said there about your father, I relate very much, to that connection from that direct descendant. My grandfather, your father's brother, they both have taken on a fight for Africville, not only so that people don't forget and it never happens again, but to hopefully one day have our people back on the lands of Africville. And just another note point there, when you were speaking about staying involved in the community, one of my earliest memories from when I picked up a basketball, I was down the Canadian Martyrs Church. I walked in, and you were coaching then too, way back, right?
Yep.
And I was with Dad, and I look up. Dad's like, that's your cousin, you know that, right? And I said, hold on. So you're telling me I got a chance to make it? I'm going to grow that big, right? This man was a giant. And my whole life, it was nothing but love between us. Every time I seen you, you always went out of your way to say hi to me. I always, come see you in uniform or not. It is what it is. That family bond can't be broken.
You're right.
And, I'm really happy to hear that you've stepped up to the plate and put yourself out there to be a board member, because this is what this podcast is all about. That next generation taking up the reins and hopefully, building off what was already done before us and using our knowledge, our experiences in this new generation to try to push the envelope even a little further. So, my hat's off to you there. Thank you for your hard work and everything that you do.
It's important because if we don't carry that torch from the generations that were before us, Africa is going to get forgotten.
Yeah.
People are going to be like, well, what? Africville, who? What happened? Oh, no. So it's our job. We got to carry that legacy on. Then we've got to pass it on to our littles.
That's it.
So our littles are now going to keep it. So that name Africville is going to be on the tip of everybody's tongue from now until the end of time. Forever. Exactly.
That's it. I'm really happy to hear, that you're following in your father's footsteps and taking that board position to try to do what you can do as well.
Yep.
Speaking of your father, we had him on the show in season 1.
Yeah.
And that was the season that we hit Amazon top podcasts in Canada. And your father was someone who came on here, spoke so eloquently about the community and its value that it has in society still today. And when he spoke on this podcast, it inspired a lot of people. I remember being down in Africville with Eddie and us meeting with people who would come on the land and say, we heard you guys on the podcast. You know what I mean? And so your father also has played a huge role in keeping that story alive, and he's joined us on this podcast. Can you tell us about your dad and how has he inspired you?
Well, he's inspired me in many ways. It's like you said, family is important to him. History is important to him. That's something that you shouldn't forget. And he instilled in me, if you want to make a change, it's not always the loud, boisterous person that's got to make that change, but it's the person that's constantly at it and keeping it in people's minds.
Right.
So you don't got to be the biggest, you don't got to be the loudest, you don't got to be the flashiest, but you are that person that's constantly being heard. So it's always know what you want and don't back down if somebody says you can't do something where something's not possible. Because if you want it and you strive to get it, you're going to achieve it. Mm-hmm. But always, at the same time, too, don't always forget your roots. Don't forget where you come from. Mm-hmm. Be grounded. Keep your feet on the ground at all times. No matter where you go in life, no matter what you do, always remember you came from somewhere. And somebody can't take that from you.
Right. One thing we talked about, I remember in season 1, was how you had different actors from the community playing different roles, right? So it seemed as though Irving was someone who would go to the municipality and would reason and would continue to advocate in City Hall, let's say. Whereas Eddie was on the land, Eddie was on the protest line, Eddie was the one, being in the media, right? And so I think that is something that organizers have to keep top of mind always on issues, is like, hidden from all sides.
Yeah.
Exactly.
So they can't ignore you.
Well,
exactly.
No, and that's what, that's the kind of reference I made between his father and my grandfather was same coin, just two different sides, right? And, maybe we wouldn't be sitting here today if they both didn't go the routes that they went. Mm-hmm. And, our listeners, the audience, they had a chance to hear Irving, and now they're hearing Shaun. But I think it's also too important to give a shout out to my Aunt Monica as well, because, my uncle, yes, he was in those places in the municipality, taking on the government way of the side of the fight. But my Aunt Monica, was right there by his side, pushing and helping through the whole thing. And I'm sure Shaun got the same exact feelings towards his mother as he does his father, because he was lucky enough to have them both there. And both of them have fought and been courageous for Africville. So I just wanted to put that out there too, right? I got to let the people know Aunt Monica was not playing around either.
Yep, 100%. The general.
That's it. And it's kind of cool to have you here now, because the career path that you followed is somewhat similar to what your father did in the eyes of people from our community. And, I took on a role with the port, which I find similar to almost like the way that your father tried to attack this problem. And it sometimes goes underlooked at that pathway. It's underappreciated, undervalued within our own community. And like you had mentioned, you're now a detective with the police force. And, for most Africvillians, most Black Nova Scotians, most Black Canadians, that might come as a surprise.
Yeah.
Right? But it's a much needed thing, I believe, because there's no way that we can change these institutions by throwing rocks from the outside.
Exactly.
Right. And like I said, the similarity with your dad is he went into an uncomfortable place through university where, there wasn't many of us doing that at this time. And he had to put up with a lot of stuff to get to where he is. And he did it. And now, he's added and contributed to keeping the spirit, the fight of Africville alive. And you are too, because a lot of the young brothers, from your generation to mine and probably the next 3-4 to follow, they often find themselves on the wrong side of the law. Yep. So it's good to see our people taking that high road and trying to encourage others to not only just become police, but to shake up industries, get in places where we haven't been. It might be uncomfortable for you, but it's going to make a difference down the road. And, first off, thank you very much for that. My question on that topic about you going to the police is, when did you first know that you wanted to be a police officer?
See, my route into policing was totally different than probably the majority of people that get into policing. Because growing up, I had the struggles. I did not like the police. The police did not like me just for the simple color of my skin. Halifax was a racist city.
Yeah,
You'd be walking to the community Y to play ball. You have a fancy pair of shoes slung across your shoulders. Police will stop you and ask you where you stole them from. It's like, well, I didn't steal from anywhere. My aunt and uncle live in Connecticut, so I was just down there and picked these up at Bob's. Like, what do you mean? So it wasn't a love for police at all. My original career path in my mind, I'm going to play ball. I'm going to go to school. I'm going to take commerce and be a CEO of some Fortune 500 company with a corner office overlooking the water.
I know one of them guys.
That was my career goal. But second year in the Dow, I'm like, you know what? This isn't my niche. I can't see myself not interacting with people. I want to be out doing something. So I applied police, military, fire. It was just a matter of who called me first. And then I noticed, I was like, wait a minute. The police are doing a special class. They want to hire some more black people onto the force. My dad talked to me about it, and I was like, I don't really want to go police. But and then he said to me, he was like, well, what are your reasons behind not wanting to be a police officer? I was like, well, you see the way the police treat us. I don't belong in that world. And he was like, no. Don't ever say you don't belong somewhere.
Then you let
And he said, the only way that you can change something is not from outside looking in. It's from the inside itself. So what you do on the inside is going to be a lot easier to make a change than it is somebody that's not part of the organization. So I was like, okay.
No, and that makes 100% sense, right? And for me, in my ears, hearing that, granddad, man, growing up my whole life, boy, get in the military, right? Like that's where he pushed me. I couldn't comprehend at the time. My thought was, how do I go to war or protect and serve a country that doesn't give two bleeps about my people, about Africville, while he's out there struggling, living in a trailer, no water, no nothing, right? So it kind of messed with my head in that sense. But I can't go back and change time, but I'm glad and happy that at least you took that risk, because I'm sure it was uncomfortable at first, and we'll get into that a little more, but hats off, man, hats off.
How did it feel to get into the service of being a policeman? Like, you went through the application, the training. How did it feel to actually make it through? And then what was that first experience like for you? Looking back on it?
It felt good to get through the process because it wasn't easy.
Yeah.
Like, I'm like, well, am I going to pass this test? Am I going to pass this test? It's like, well, am I answering these questions properly? Like, are they looking at me like, who's this young guy? Like, oh.
And was it a role as a detective from day one?
No.
Okay.
No. When you start off in policing, you're straight in the uniform,
right,
out on the streets, dealing with people. So once you're done your 8 months of police academy, you're out there on the street, which is good because I was always, like Eddie said, I was into coaching, so I wanted to be out there. I wanted to be interacting with people.
Right.
I like that social aspect of it. But it was definitely tough once everything was all said and done. I remember it was my second day of class. That's when I got my first eye opener of, well, what am I gonna experience through this? Because my experience was definitely different than the guys and girls that were sitting next to me that didn't look like me because their experience was a little easier than mine. So after my first run-in, it was an eye-opener. I was like, okay, I see how this has got to be played. I'll play your game, but guess what? This is chess. This ain't checkers. So you're not going to get to me that easy.
Yeah.
I'm going to be around for the long run.
Two decades later, he was playing chess. He was playing chess.
And you have to.
Yeah, for sure.
It's not a game for the weak because they will try and break you down. And I have to admit, 23 years later, it's not the same force that it was when I first come on. There's been some changes for the good. Yeah. We've seen some improvements, but we still have a way to go.
Some work to do. But as long as it's heading in the right direction, you know, maybe you can even, it might be hard for you to do this, but take a little bit of credit in those struggles that you went through to now see that the police force is moving in a, it may be at a slower rate than you like, but it's moving in the right direction.
It's moving.
When we find success, whatever career, even if you went and became that Fortune 500 CEO, it seems like when we find success that's not in the streets, our people have a hard time accepting that.
You're correct on that one.
And so I know personally myself, but I'm hoping that you could share, maybe even if you don't want to get into the personal details, maybe you could share the feeling you had when some of our community members had heard that you were a police, people that you went to school with, chilled with, played ball with, how their reaction to your decision to better your life and hopefully better our community, how that made you feel.
Oh, it's true what you say. It's like I find that we will eat our own. We don't want to see our own progress further than where we're at. So if we're at a certain level, we don't like to see somebody get past us. So that was one of the biggest things when you decide to go, okay, well, I'm going to go into policing. A lot of people are like, well, you're going to policing. I guess we ain't cool no more.
Yeah. Did you get cut off? Like, were they?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah. People that you wouldn't think would cut off would be like, oh, well, I guess I'm cut off.
And I know you got that thick skin, but regardless, it hurts.
It hurts.
It does.
It hurts. It's like, you're used to having a large group that you roll with, and then your circles just get smaller. But as you get older, you realize, you know what, maybe that was the best.
Yeah.
You shed off that excess weight, and then you move on.
And one thing that I notice is it doesn't matter to you necessarily, you know, all of our families, the people of Africville, some people aren't, you know, straight and narrow by the book, but you show love no matter what, no matter where you are, whether you're in uniform or not. If somebody from the community is present or in your area, you're making your way to say, you know, hey, how you doing?
Yep.
It's nice to see you. I love you. How's mom's? How's dad's? Right? Like,
Yeah.
and so that speaks volume to your character, to the man that you've become, to the man that your father and your mother raised. So
yeah, that's one thing I always said. I was like, I would not let police change who I am. I'm a police officer. That is my job.
Yeah.
That is not who I am as a person. Doesn't matter what I'm wearing.
Yeah.
When I see people, I'm acknowledging people.
Yeah.
I'm not treating you no different. We're still cool. We're going to do things the same way. It's just now I'm in a position where if you need help, I can probably help you a lot more than I could if I was in another position.
And that's a very good point. So instead of being like a reactive police officer, you could be preventative as long as someone reached out, you know, hey man, like things aren't going well. You know how it is. I got to support the family, but I got myself caught up. I need a way out.
Yep.
And I'm sure if they came to you, you might not be able to directly tell them certain things, but you're going to try to show them a pathway to escape the situation they're in for the better.
I know what resources they need.
Yeah.
Because I'm in that world. So it's like, okay, well, I'm going to put you in contact with this person. I'm going to hook you up with this person.
Yeah.
I have a personal connection, which is why I can make a phone call. Hey, look, so-and-so needs some help. I'm reaching out on their behalf. Let's link up. Because there are times when people are in situations and it's of no fault of their own. It's just that's where they end up.
Yeah.
Bad things happen to good people.
That's it.
Doesn't make them a bad person.
No.
Made a bad choice, made a mistake. Why should you be penalized for the rest of your life over something that you did that could have been avoided or can be rectified without throwing the book at you?
Yeah.
So let's go this route. And that's one of the reasons why after I did my community policing in the cars, I decided, well, my next step, I'm going to be a school officer. So I worked in the schools for 7.5 years, and that was probably the most rewarding position because now I'm dealing with children of people that I know. So I can start guiding them in different directions.
Yeah.
And that on top of coaching, when I look at coaching, it's not like, okay, I'm not going to take the best player. I may take that player that they need ball. Because if they don't have ball,
that's powerful.
then I'm going to be dealing with them with my other hat instead of my coaching hat.
Yeah.
But I've got no problems taking you under my wing and showing you, hey, there's more out there than this, and this.
Yeah.
Stick with me, I'll get you through. And there was a few kids that, not to blow my own horn, but if I didn't do that, I know for a fact I would have been dealing with them on the other side.
Yeah, but let me give you a toot because, you know, that's what we need in our community, than people with that firsthand experience that's seen it. You know, like you said, you grew up playing ball at the Y, and that was a safe haven for a lot of us. Mom and Dad always kept me out of trouble as best as they could, but that place also changed my life for the better, right? And it's very rewarding, I guess, to see that stuck with you, and now that you're trying to reverse the role. And another thing, you know, we mentioned it out there, but we got to let the people know. You went, 26-0 last year?
23-0.
23-0 last year.
Michael Jordan number to go.
Let's go. Right? So it's beautiful to see. We need more of it, unfortunately, but it's good to know that we have leaders taking that challenge on. You know what I mean? So, again, all I can do is keep thanking you because you're doing all the right things, man.
Amazing. Shaun, what are your hopes for the future of Africville? What do you think this community would have been if left alone? And given where we are today, where do you think it should go in the future?
Well, the reality is if Africville was given the support that they should have gotten right from jump, from running water, your sewer system, your paved roads that the rest of the city got, that would have been a community that would have thrived. Because the stories I hear from my dad, Africville was the community that you wanted to be. It was like our old neighborhood up in North End growing up. You knew your neighbors. They knew who you were. When the streets light come on, your mom picked up that phone. They would call 5 houses up, and everyone knew. Make sure you got home because they knew who you were.
Yeah.
It was a community that raised each other. And we've gotten so far away from that now that we don't know our neighbor. We don't know our neighbor's kids. We don't know what's going on. It's always not my kid, not my problem. But with the love that Africville had, that was instilled in all of us that are descendants from Africville, that we're passing along, you know that there would have been great things. Ideally, in a perfect world, I would like to see our land back there, something done up for the seniors that are still here.
Yeah.
Have them live their remaining days on the grounds that were taken from them that they probably still would have been living on if they were able to pass it down generation to generation like everybody else does. So give them a plot, whether it's we build a senior center, we build a community of tiny homes, something.
Yeah.
Give something back to those people that were there in the thick of it when you decided to come in and say, no, we got to get rid of you because we're building a bridge.
Well, that's just it, right? And even today, for like to terms of reference today, Dartmouth Cove, they're doing infilling over there now. The port undertook what you see in front of the church now, but what is neglected to be mentioned is they were getting paid per square cubic meter of infill that was put out there, right?
Yep.
And our people didn't own just that beautiful piece of land that, you know, on its own was probably worth billions in today's monies. We also owned, 150 meters out into the water?
Yeah.
So that water access would have instantly allowed us to be a part of any industry in the marine transportation world. And so there you go, not only to have the homes back, but now, you know, with something that they saw no value in, we still have potential to turn that new infilled equestrian land into something that we could, you know, all benefit from as a community, whether it be, you know, economically with jobs or just money in the bank to expand the community, to be able to build those tiny homes or the old folks' home ourselves, right? So it's definitely a challenge to find the starting point, but there's so many people with so many great ideas of what could return to Africville. It's just something that we need to explore. Right. So thank you for sharing that. And I don't know if you're familiar with it, but we have that revisioning process going on with the city. So just a little back end info for you. After the George Floyd incident had happened, Granddad, you know, John Tatry, the guy that wrote his book, he started a GoFundMe for him, and that enabled him to get that new trailer that you see down there. And that's how Alfred and I had crossed paths. And in doing so, at the time he was operating this thing called collective action. And what it did was it pretty much fast-tracked people's concerns to their local MLAs, different levels of government officials, the whole works. And inevitably, this is where the revisioning process from Councillor Lindell Smith came into play. And now we're here today, 2024. I believe that was in 2021. And that's what kind of concerns me, is it's always been the same thing when it comes to Africville. You know, show you a little light, but then let's take another 5-10 years to even see anything come of it. And like you had mentioned, the last days, you know, of a lot of people, just since the last 6 months, Granddad had a stroke. He's blind in his left eye. 2 months ago, he dropped dead pretty much and he was in the hospital. And that's just one of many. So how long do we have until we can see, you know, or let those who did experience life in Africville to be given that back?
Exactly.
You know?
Shaun, what advice do you have for the average listener, someone who doesn't know about Africville and is learning about the story of Africville for the first time by listening to this podcast? What advice do you have for them, or what do you want them to do? What do you want to tell them?
Well, the first thing, if you don't know about Africville, you need to know. It's not going to probably be taught to you very much in schools, but it's go online, read the books. The Hermit of Africville is a great book. Read that. Get to know what actually happened, because there's so many different versions of why the land was taken, but at the end of the day, it was taken for greed.
Yeah.
They seen a community that was thriving with a bunch of black people, and they said, nope, we're not having this. We got to get rid of them. It wouldn't happen in Kingswood.
No.
So why did it happen to them? So definitely do your research and follow up on it. And then the other thing is, don't ever stop fighting for something that you want. If as soon as you give up, you've now lost.
Yeah.
It may be a long battle, but be prepared to dig your heels in and keep fighting.
So yeah, thank you for everything that you shared with us today. I hope that our listeners enjoyed you being here. Maybe one last thing that we could get you to do is to speak directly to the youth, to those, who may be facing that challenge of taking the life of the streets or trying to find the right path to, not only keep themselves better, but better the lives of their family.
Well, my biggest message, especially to the youth, is you got to realize that everything we do as humans is a learned behavior. From the time that we're born, we know how to cry, pee, poop, and eat. We have to learn how to control our head, sit up, walk, and crawl. If you find yourself at a point in your life where you're continuing on what you were taught, let me be that person to step in now and say, hey, there is more out there. Look for those people that look like you in professions that you think that you couldn't belong in, whether that's police, fire, EHS, banking, whatever it is. Seek out those people that look like you. Have a conversation with them because you belong in those industries. It's hard not seeing yourself reflected, but until you step in, now that little person that's coming up behind you is going to say, hey, they look like me. If they can do it, I can do it. It's not going to be easy, but we need you to realize that just because you're taught to live a certain way, you don't have to continue to live that way. If policing is the route you want to go, great. We need more people in police that look like me and look like you because we are the ones that are going to make that change and show people that there is another way than what the streets are teaching you. It may not seem cool. You have that mentality where snitches get stitches, or I see nothing, not my child, not my problem. Speak up. Is until we start supporting ourselves, especially as Black people, because I find that that's the hardest thing that I see is when Black people bring down other Black people because they don't want them to get ahead. We need to band together. And when we do that, then we're going to progress. Then we're going to succeed. And you will see a totally different outcome. And maybe these problems that we are having now are not going to be problems in the future that our children have to deal with.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for that. And I guess, just to add on that, what you're saying in my ears, I'm hearing it's never too early to be an inspiration. And we've seen that in our community. Maybe you weren't a cop or a detective yet, but you were going to that gym and the younger guy that was watching you pick up the ball was saying, oh man, look what he's doing. So try to do the right thing as early as possible and watch the rest follow you, right? Yep. Set that example early and stick to it. Like you said, dig your heels in. And the one last thing that I wanted to touch on is when we talk about what happened in Africville, many people think that, in 1969, they just came with the trucks and the bulldozers and poof, Africville was gone. The exploitation of Africville started in the late 1800s when they put that railway directly through the community. And, that was the start of the destruction of Africville. So like, my cousin said, go online, do your research, read about it, and you're going to see why we are still so proud of a people, why we continue to fight, why our heels are dug in, and not only ours, those who come after us. And the problem today that we see is when we did get removed from Africville, we were placed into public housing for the most part. Most of our families were put in public housing. Well, what's that situation looking like today? Because, we are taking on influxes of people, which isn't a bad thing. But now these homes and communities that were promised to the people of Africville to live in after they were put on welfare and things like this that they never had any problems with, now that's being taken from them again. And I think that's where we're starting to see that not my child, not my problem issue, because now we're being dispersed once again, but even further apart now. Now there's people being forced out of Uniacke Square because they're older and their children have gone and grown up, but that's still their home, what they considered their home. So it's sad to see the similarities of what our communities are facing today is the same as those who lived in Africville.
Yep. I think the biggest thing is there's strength in numbers. And they see, well, if I've got a group here, if I can disperse them far enough away from each other, then that strength is not going to be weakened because that chain's not as strong.
Yeah. No, and that's nothing but the truth, right? That's how it worked for them back in the day, and why change the plan if it worked so well then?
Divide and conquer,
right? And so hopefully, yourself, myself, people like Alfred who aren't from Africville or have no direct ties, continue to help us not only feel like we're doing the right thing, but join in and try to make a positive impact, a change. Speak on whatever front you have to do to let people know, like, it's time to do the right thing by the people of Africa.
Correct. Takes a village.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing that with us, man. That's a good note.
I think that's a good note to drop the mic.
Yeah.
We're excited to be back. Africville Forever Season 2. We're happy that you joined us on our journey from the first season, and we received profound and positive feedback. But the biggest problem was our listeners want to know how they could help. And that's typical in today's society. The unknown, it's challenging. People want to know how to help other people, but they're unsure of how to do it. So one of the best things that you could do, and a great way to help us here, would be to share this podcast with everybody in your life. And then from there, go to your own social media accounts. Share the podcast there, simply with the caption, #Africville Forever, and drop a little orange heart in there and let the people know that we stand united. Thank you all very much.